Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today we're going to talk about how to stop struggling with watercolor and simply paint what you see. I'm going to share with you a two-step process, just to very easily portray what you're seeing in a photo or a view in front of you. So we're going to do the whole first wash and then second wash and be done with it. So the first wash, what I'm doing is establishing colors. Now, I don't care if the colors aren't dark enough. All I care about is that I'm putting in the right colors, something to put me on track. The reason I'm doing this is sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what to paint and exactly where to paint, but when you just tint the paper with a bit of color, it's much easier to come back with a second wash once everything is dry and then put in all the final details. You're gonna see pretty much 2 layers only. Now, when you're doing this first step of just painting, I don't pre-wet the whole paper, or I don't necessarily use a huge brush and paint over everything. I do like to keep sections separate, so you just see me painting the sky and then the water and all of the interesting nuanced transitions from blue to green. Then I'm putting in the rooftops, but I'm not really the kind of person to paint top to bottom everything. I used to do that more, not so much today. I have nothing against it, it's just something that naturally happened. So I do like to paint the right colors in every area I can, but it's still very light. It's still very light. It doesn't have a strong impact, but what it does is it gives me a map of what to paint. Now you'll notice a couple of interesting things. The rooftops are quite orange. Now I almost never get caught up on what exact color I'm seeing. I'm perfectly fine with the colors not matching perfectly. So I'm using whatever orange I enjoy mixing or I happen to mix, rather than trying to match the exact orange. Now this is a really important part. And a lot of people struggle with these kinds of colors. This is just a wall color, like an old building wall. And people always, they look at it and they think it's a yellow, and then they end up very often using pure yellows. The problem is that it's not. It's not a pure yellow. It's some kind of a brown or a neutral color, especially once we'll add the shadow. So I'm already setting myself up to paint it that way. So I'm using this dirty brown color. Now, the floor is surprisingly gray. You'll notice it almost looks more violet-y than the walls. That's because it's more gray. If you look at violet and yellow, or brown and kind of brown and purple, they're on opposite sides, complementary colors. The middle is a gray. And then, lastly, this is the final detail for this first wash, is just putting in some of these same walls, same kind of structure. It's the same structure, right? It's around Ponte Vecchio in Florence, but these walls are exposed to light. So because of that, you're gonna get a cleaner brown yellow. It's still not a clean yellow at all, and this is a really important bit to remember. These colors aren't clean. The closest thing to a clean color here are the rooftops. Now, see all these white gaps? I'm just kind of closing them up. It's not a big deal. Sometimes it is a big deal and you have to make corrections. Now, here is probably the most important wash of this painting. I am going to paint this aspiring to get all the details in one go and make things as dark as they should be. Now, this looks quite strong, but remember that this, first it's gonna dry lighter, and this is in the background. It's gonna be quite light. I could have gone even with more gray. I went quite purple here, and that's fine. I'm gonna clear that up in the finishing touches. And now, as I move down to the right, I'm adding a bit more blue. I want to start establishing these bridges. These bridges are the key element, aside from the buildings we're seeing and all the people down there you'll see in a second. It just looks wonderful. Now, the bridges are so far away, you don't need much. You don't need a lot of details. This is a good hint. The one bridge I am gonna focus on is Ponte Vecchio. So check it out. I'm using a warm-ish color for the roof, and then I'm gonna use that same nice muted yellow for this wall. It's a brown, right, for the wall of the bridge, because the roof of the bridge is a little warm, kind of weathered down though. All of this, everything here is weathered down in a really nice way. And then the wall is a little more on the brown side. But notice the bottom of the bridge. I'm going for it. So I'm placing in these darks because this is a dark part. I'm leaving this small highlight where the wall of the bridge catches the sunlight. But you see, my aim is to have this be the final color. And I love painting this way because it's very satisfying. It's a quick win. And you will get a quick win if instead of always thinking about postponing the end result, you just go for it. Now, there are many reasons why aspiring painters and beginners to watercolor and students, they postpone the finished touch because they're scared. Very often they're scared of putting something too permanent, of putting something that there's no returning from. So they end up gradually and slowly building up the painting, and that can work. Sometimes it does. I'm gonna take a sip of my water here. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it ends up not really working and making everything too messy, cluttered, and overworked. Now pay close attention to what I'm doing here. I'm going to switch my brushes. I'm going to just apply a clean, watery wash, just water, so that I can start having a smooth transition there onto the greener, the darker green. The water here is surprisingly neutral. It's not a strong green, right? And you can tell, I think. If you train your eyes, after a while, you're able to see these things. And now I'm going to start adding a bit of stronger yellows and greens onto it because it should be darker. And if there is a part I'm going to have to rework, it's probably this part, just to make it a little as dark as it needs to be, but that's fine. The part that's closest to us, look at this rich green. It's not too strong, it's too vibrant, but that's fine. That's where you have some artistic license, and I like how it contrasts with the more neutral green in the background. And as we move towards the land, now is gonna come one of the most fun, in my opinion, parts here, which is establishing the roofs and the wall. So check it out, because as I mentioned, so many students, they are so fearful of putting something permanent that they end up almost incrementally adding details. And the thing with the incremental details is it's fine if your technique is like perfect, you can get away with it, but no one's technique is really perfect, myself included, and so it leaves almost like a film grain in a way. Not really a film grain literally, but look at it as an analogy. It leaves artifacts. Every time you pause a shape and you start a new shape, there are artifacts. And the more you can avoid that, usually the smoother it looks. Now, some people are able to pull it off. They don't get anything to look overworked. They just do it perfectly. You may be one of them. Don't listen to what I'm saying as this is how you should paint or anything like that. Just hear the gist behind it and experiment for yourself. That's the main thing. Now, look at this wall. This is just a strong brown, and I want to make sure it's strong enough. I have no intentions of going back over this area again. And you know, some people are worried I'm painting this wall next to the water that's still wet. I find that if you don't dab, as I've shown you before, if you just swipe the brush, it's okay. The washes won't merge too much, especially if there was a bit of a break between the two, and if one of them is stronger than the other, it tends to end up working okay. I also left a bit of a gap there. I'm kind of cheating, but that's fine. Now, here's another part. So you think to yourself, wow, this is really dark. This is what the final thing looks like. It looks dark because we're painting this directly on an underpainting. But if you think this is dark, look at what I'm doing here. I'm going to put the shadow cast by the wall, the architecture, the people. There's tons of people walking by there, walking along the side of the road. It's such a touristy place. Did I say, I said Florence, right? It's Florence. I didn't say Venice earlier, right? Just making sure. Now, within this crowd of people, there are a lot of small, beautiful details. Like you can see some strong red shirts, people wearing red shirts, not red shirts at a TV show. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it. Blue shirts, some really strong details that hint that this is a crowd of people. And with these things, you know, in the beginning, it's hard to portray. The more experienced you are, the more you'll learn how to portray noise, portray texture without painting each and every grain, portray people without painting each and every body and each and every face. It's just one of those things you slowly get. And I know this looks strong, right? But it looks final. And this is one of my favorite stages in a painting, is when you do start putting in the final colors and putting in the final details, right? These little shapes that I'm putting in, they're meant to tell the final story. This is as dark as this area gets, and I love this contrast between areas that only have the first wash and areas that have these very permanent marks on them. Now, can you just paint this wash directly? The answer is always yes. The answer is yes to everything. You can do whatever you want, test it out. I have a way that I've grown to like and enjoy and get used to, and I sometimes break my own mold too. You'll have a process that you're getting used to and that you enjoy doing, and that is perfectly fine. Either way is fine. You find out what inspires you. Key important factor here, the road is also darker. I know it's lit, no doubt, but it's dark. And it's dark compared to the walls to the right, so you want to make sure you get that contrast down right. If something doesn't look right, usually the key culprit is the value and the shape. The colors, they do a lot, but they aren't often the deal breaker. It's more about the values and the shapes that you're painting. And if you take a few steps back from the screen right now, you'll already see this starts to look three-dimensional. It starts to look like a well-lit scene. And when I look back at my watercolor journey, this is what attracted me to watercolor painting. This exact thing of putting in a dark shadow and thus painting the light, telling the full story of lights and darks. When you paint something dark, you immediately bring out the light, and vice versa. When you leave something light, the darks tell more of a story. And all of these things where so many intermediate painters struggle. If you already you're okay, you can sometimes get the result you want, but not always. And you are still not happy with where you are. A lot of the struggles I'm seeing with these kinds of artists is the putting it all together part. That is a challenging bit, and that is something that comes with experience and allowing yourself to develop that experience, that unique experience of your own. When you stop following tutorials and just painting along, when you start making your own art, these things start to fall into place. So do the whole, watch the videos, learn from the courses, right? Check out my courses, links in the description box below. The frustration-free watercolor course is what you want if you have trouble letting go. But past a certain point, what you really want to do is break away from that and discover almost your path of least resistance, how you enjoy creating, how you enjoy painting. If you are a permanent process follower and lesson watcher, you never get to the point where you really solve your own problems. And when you solve your own problems, you tend to come up with more interesting solutions that are uniquely yours. So the more an artist grows in isolation, the more unique their work gets. I believe Joseph Zbukvich told that story of how there was barely any information out there on watercolor painting, and whatever he learned very much in isolation with himself by experimentation. And this is why his style is so unique. Now, there are a lot of people who copied that style and painted that style, but before that, his style is really, really unique. You could equate it to a lot of other people's paintings, but really when you look at the nuances, he does things that I don't see any other artists do, except for Dusan Dukarik. He paints really similar to Joseph Zbukvich. Sometimes I get hate for saying that, but I'm sorry. But yeah, Joseph Z, he has something unique, especially his kind of golden age of paintings. I don't even know where to place that golden age. It's recent. He's really good. Now I'm doing the exact same thing with the water. Okay, first I put in that straight kind of downward facing shape of the cast reflection shadow over the bridge. Now I'm darkening. Now look at how I'm going in with colors. I'm not scared to put in crazy colors and strong colors, because I know I can always adjust it in real time. So if you're scared of that, I have a bunch of lessons and videos on how to fix mistakes live in your paintings. You can check that out, do that, research, go down that rabbit hole. This is why I'm never worried about placing in really strong details, I can always fix them on the fly. The thing that will benefit you much more than worrying about what you're doing and worrying things aren't going to work out is instead to pay attention to what's actually going on paper. If you pay attention to what's going on paper, the answers will come to you. But most who struggle with watercolor, they don't even look at the painting. They don't look at it and actually observe it cleanly. Instead, they're scared of it. They're scared of the details. They're scared of the shapes. Just look at it, see what's happening. You can fix a lot of things on the fly really well. Now I'm using my trusty white gel pen. Usually I'll use either a white gel pen or opaque paint, just gouache. The white gel pen is really good for thin lines, so that's where I'm going to get that. I hope you enjoyed this process. If you want to support my work, I would greatly appreciate if you check out my frustration-free watercolor course. Learn finally how to paint loose, beautiful, happy, free watercolors that look like watercolor. Link in the description box below. I also want to take this opportunity to thank from the bottom of my heart to everyone who supported me over on Patreon. And if you want to receive access to a couple of exclusive processes and receive credits at the end of my videos, as you see here on the screen, be sure to check that out as well. All links in the description box below. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.